is Gail Thacker, everybody, and EileenDover, EileenDover.
Hello.
Hi. Eileen, I think you were just wonderful.
You are amazing. I just adore you.
Oh, thank you, darling. I want to take the time of this episode to share with others who might not know everything about you. Are you okay with that?
Like a lot of fun?
Yeah, we'll have fun.
Definitely.
Okay,
it's
first.
On this end of the interview.
I'm sure. But first, before we start, which pronoun do you prefer?
Oh, I'm pretty easygoing. You know, she, he. Just not they. I don't like they. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start out with little you. You grew up in South Boston, Southie. What was it like as a young gay artist there?
So, I mean, the thing about Southie is in the 80s, there was a lot of tension and a lot of violence, and it was sort of run by Whitey Bulger. You know, if you watch the movie The Departed, it gives you somewhat of a picture of what it was like there. I always felt like I was in a fishbowl because I was in a major city, but I was like looking out at the world. And Southie was sort of like a small town inside of a major city. So it was not really, the in thing to do to be different in South Boston. But for young straight artistic types or anybody who was a little bit different, it was difficult. But I'm blessed that I have such an amazing family, and they've stood by me through all of my trips and everything else.
Yeah, that's very important. You kind of like really developed yourself from where you are now. And this is going to be a mouthful, okay? And after the mouthful, I will structure the question for you, okay?
Okay.
All right, so Eileen, you've been a performance artist for many years now in Boston and New York City. I would like you to share with us a little bit about your experience and how it intertwined with Boy George, Cyndi Lauper, and how the superstar Madonna influenced your philosophy on life, spiritually and visually. So let's start with, how did the superstar Madonna influence your philosophy on life?
So Madonna, along with Cyndi and Boy George and Betty Davis, Joan Clark, all of those really strong women, and Boy George and Freddie Mercury, like young gay kids, we didn't have like openly gay heroes on television. And I mean, there were some that were obviously gay, but they didn't say that. So, who would I look up to? Like Paul Lynde? I mean, Hollywood Squares. So I was like identified more with, Madonna looked on the outside how I felt on the inside, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
And Boy George, definitely, when I saw him on MTV, I just knew that there was a world out there that I was going to fit into at some point. I just was sort of, not there. And,
Right. How did that intertwine with Boy George? Did you work with him, for him?
So later on, years later, Boy George was doing a lot of DJing, and he was on tour DJing, and I had become at some Boston nightclubs the door person, as well as the host, or and sometimes I performed. But I worked, in the clubs, and that particular night that he was there, it was like in the year 2000. I was in a sort of little VIP booth that was next to the DJ booth, and I was hosting a party with Carmen Electra, and George and I just sort of started teasing each other like queens do, like, giving each other the business. And when the club closed, it just continued on into the dressing room, and we were there until like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And he ended up staying in Boston for a week, and we went and saw Marilyn Manson, we went out dancing, we went out to dinner, and we've been friends ever since. So,
wow.
They say don't meet your idols, but I disagree, because, like, I think George is amazing, and he's been, he's been a part of my life since I was a little kid, and then, how lucky does one get than to become friends with somebody that they looked up to on that level?
That is a blessing. And Cyndi Lauper, did you work for her or with her?
Several times. Cyndi Lauper, in both Boston and New York, I had the opportunity and was blessed to backup dance and backup sing, like the Hey Now Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and she re-released that. And I didn't connect with her like I did with George. It was just work, but she is so talented, and she's so such an advocate of people who are different. It sort of has that a magnet,
Yeah, so wait a minute. Let me back up for a second. You were a dancer on one of her videos?
No, it was a live performance.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That's a hit.
Well,
that's great.
She came to town, and, she told the promoters, of the club, she was like, I need 5 drag queens. And they grabbed a couple of the girls, and I sort of wasn't included. I pushed my way in, because that's who I am. And ended up, being part of the little, we rehearsed for like 5 minutes, and she did her vocal exercises, which are really, really funny. They're really she blows up balloons and increases her lung capacity, which is, I've never seen anybody do it quite that way. But I had to pick her up off the ground, and I was a heavy drinker, and Georgie, back then, I hadn't gotten sober yet, so I almost dropped her, and I'm lucky I didn't. But she was wearing gorilla food. It was really funny.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Now, back to Madonna. Did she influence you visually? Because you did a really great performance of one of her songs at the Jean Franco when we did 24 Bond Art Center in the window. So what about that?
Yeah, I tend not to be a celebrity impersonator, but I do. There's some people that just like Madonna that I just, I'm sort of cuckoo for Cocoa Pops over. Madonna was so extreme, we look back at the things that she did in the 80s, and we're like, oh, that's nothing by today's standards, but, you got to imagine, queer kid, there's no word for gender nonconforming, there's no word for, the word is gay, but you're not hearing gay, you're hearing faggot. And you see this woman on TV who's just, is around gay people and accepting gay people, and, and she herself is, so larger than life and so strong, and I just was drawn to strong women, and she epitomized that. And then, in 1990, I came out of the closet. I don't think I came out. I don't think I was ever, there was ever any mystery. But in 1990, when Truth or Dare was released, and, that was the first time I saw 2 men kissing, and shortly thereafter, I ended up going to Boston Alliance of Gay and Lesbian Youth and meeting my tribe, but, she was exposing the whole country to gay men and to queer people, you know. So I guess that's, you know,
that's very important. That's very important. And how does that intertwine with your experience with the AIDS epidemic and you working in healthcare? Was that before the clubs or after?
So I graduated high school, and like by the skin of my teeth, I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. And, you know, like I said, I come from a very loving and supportive home, but I had to go. You know, I had to get out of South Boston. I just couldn't, I just couldn't be there anymore. So I got a job at a nightclub and a job washing dishes at a restaurant, in the gay neighborhood, in the south end of Boston. And, you know, I worked in the clubs for years. I worked in the clubs in New York. I was always coming back and forth to and from New York. You know, in the later 90s, I was like couch surfing in New York, and I would just come here and not go home. So I was living here part-time, and early 2000s, I was, you know, living here part-time, and going back to Boston and doing that part-time. And then I got sober. You know, working in the clubs back then, it was so decadent, and it lent itself to substance abuse and alcohol. And, you know, unfortunately, or fortunately, you know, that's a way that I escaped, you know, because I had been through so much with bullying and the Catholic school scandal and all that stuff. The drugs and alcohol were my escape. So I ended up working in public health at Fenway Community Health Center, which if I go back, I did community service in Catholic schools at the AIDS Action Committee, and my mother was awesome. The Catholic school said, no, you can't do AIDS Action Committee because they were morally opposed to it, and my mother wrote them a note. And she said, yes, you will let him do community service at AIDS Action Committee. And I asked her years later why, you know, she had done that, because, you know, my parents are very conservative, very quiet, very, you know, very traditional people. And she said, well, because I didn't know if I knew how to have that conversation with you about, like, you know, how to stay safe. And AIDS was huge. Everybody the first year that I was out and about, everybody that I met was gone. You know, it was like the changing of the guard constantly.
Right. But you were very young at this point.
Yeah.
You were amazingly young and just coming of age.
I was 14, and I was already, like, sneaking out of the house, going to the gay bars, you know, and actually the EileenDover character came from, you know, I realized if I put makeup on and used somebody else's ID, I could get into the clubs. And so I would speak out, and I would do that. And the queens would read me because I looked awful. And so I started getting good at it, and they started paying me eventually. But fast forward, you know, to public health, I was really passionate. I was really, like, the whole time, you know, involved in the activism that was going on with ACT-UP and Queer Nation around HIV/AIDS. And so when I got sober, I decided to work for a nonprofit that helped people with HIV/AIDS and substance abuse issues. You know, because I had been helped, and
fantastic.
I don't know how I managed to avoid contracting HIV. I don't know how I avoided it, but I definitely did not avoid drug addiction. So, you know, Fenway Health saved my life. You know, the program saved my life, and then I decided that, you know, I wanted to work in that field as a profession. And the people there, my supervisors, they saw how important the artist side of me was. So they were supportive, and I was able to, you know, few creative things. We did a crystal meth marketing campaign. We reached underserved communities. We did theater in the Fens, which is the Fens is a park where guys go.
Yep, yep. The men go in late at night. Mark used to tell me about that.
Yeah, so we would go and we would do street theater and hand out like coffee and donuts and condoms and lube and stuff like that. And which was really, they hated us because we were singing at the top of our lungs at 3 o'clock in the morning and ruining the time. But
that's amazing. But that's also something I want to share with our listeners, that you're not only a performance artist, you're a visual artist. You started a clothing line.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would be, that's the thing that most people would be surprised to know. I had a column. I'm a writer, so it's like jack of all trades. I hope I'm a master at least something. But,
yeah, but we all work in many, many different mediums, because that's, the Renaissance artist right now. When I love your clothing line that you're working on. I see all kinds of influences in that, like Vivienne Westwood, Malcolm McLean, Susan Close, Scooter LaForge. What inspired your clothing line?
Well, when I was working on night at the Limelight called Royal Bitches with Boy George, and then I was doing Saturday nights there as well. This was like the tail end of the club scene. Santa Glam was Saturday night, and Royal Bitches was Monday. So Boy George was working on a clothing line called Be Rude, and he sort of showed me how to screen print a little bit, and then I ended up connecting with artists and friends in the community and people that I knew. I had a friend who knew how to screen print, and I just started doing it as sort of like, a hobby. We all went to Pat Fields to look for clothes and looks and everything like that. So in addition to George's line, Be Rude, I also saw Scooter's line. And, with regard to Vivienne Westwood, George was inspired by Vivienne Westwood. So it's like everybody was wearing, all of the designers that you mentioned, they were woven through the fabric of music and all of that. I think, like, art now, like, music and fashion and writing and everything, it's all together, harmoniously, or at least it was.
Yeah, you can see how it intertwines, that, especially music and fashion, and now fashion with visual art.
And I think George and Scooter LaForge were the two people, I think, that I saw for the first time, that I saw that they were screen printing and they were painting directly onto clothing. So the clothing became, in and of itself, a one-of-a-kind piece of art. And I know Keith Haring did that. I know Basquiat, I believe, painted on clothing. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't know if
Basquiat painted on everything.
Yeah, these are the people that inspired me that I didn't even get to meet. I'm very fortunate. I've met pretty much every person that I've idolized who's been alive. And these artistic giants that we lost to AIDS, their work continued on and continued to inspire generations. So here we are.
Yeah, there is a vocabulary, which we are part of, because that generation of artists is not that long ago. So what are you going to do with that clothing line? Where can we find it?
So right now, everything is just sort of on social media. I have a little shop on this app. It's called, it's called Depop. But if somebody wants to reach out to me for art at the EileenDover on any social media, and I'm sure we'll post the links underneath.
Right.
Each of my, I do prints and I do clothing and T-shirts, pants, suits, everything. Anything I can paint on, I do. And they're all one of a kind. So, it's tough though because we're in the middle of this pandemic. And,
but people are dying to, spend their money online. People are, they go on Google and search for things. So let's make sure that we get your links on this site so people can see what we're talking about. And also, you not only paint on clothes, you paint on canvas, you paint on paper. So
I paint my face. I mean, the whole EileenDover character really was just my expression to the world of how I felt. There were times that I was very punk rock, that I was very club kid, that I was very, then I went through, a time where I was very female, and I looked very, very, very female, and that sort of, and again, that harkens back to the fact that I really, really, I don't understand when people say drag makes fun of women, because it was a tribute. It was an absolute tribute to, want to be as much like this strong women. I always saw women as so strong. I mean, my mother is very sweet and very quiet, but she's also incredibly strong. And my father too, but
Right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I guess it depends on who the artist is, whether they're making fun or not.
But, yeah. If somebody was intentionally making fun, I mean, I think that's a shame, because women, as far as I'm concerned, if it weren't for women, I don't know if I would have made it, in my journey, because I didn't, like I said, we didn't have gay men to look up to, and we didn't, there was no RuPaul's Drag Race, there was no internet, there was no Google, there was no,
Right. We had to create our own scene in our own, right.
You go to the Glad Day bookstore, which you'd have to find out by going to this and going, and it would take 3 weeks for you to find, I don't know, a book that explains X, Y, and Z. I mean, there was just nothing, or books that were written by gay people. It just wasn't accessible. So, but I started stealing John Waters movies when I was 9 or 10 or 11.
Yeah.
The video store. I really, really was way, way, way influenced really young. And my poor parents, I mean, they could not keep up with me. I was
well, they're proud of you, actually. So, yeah. I'm sure. We always, when we're young, we always think our parents don't know anything. But, probably knew a lot more than we think. Because as I know from you, your parents have been supportive all the way with whatever, unconditionally. And that's beautiful. Not many people get that.
Definitely relationships that my parents and my brother that I've had to re-earn. They never left, but, the trust and everything, when you're an active addict or alcoholic, the trust it vanishes because you become so unpredictable. I was like this, I didn't trust myself. I didn't know who I was at that point. The depths of addiction can really turn you into this, the way my mother put it, she's like, we kind of had to have a funeral for you in our heads and process your death because you weren't there. It wasn't you. It was just the body, the shell.
Right, right. But that's the addiction, and that's not just sexuality.
No, it had nothing to do with sexuality. I mean,
right. I just wanted to make that clear. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was very fuck you in my outward expression, though, and I think that, like, you know, I went to extremes in the way that I acted, the way that I looked, the way that I expressed myself. Anyway,
I relate, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was just my anger, you know, for being, you know, and one thing I'll say, you know, I always talk about Southie being a tough place to grow up, but let me tell you something, you know, they're the worst of the worst people, but the best of the best people as well, because the people that stuck by me, that, you know, and that, you know, or who maybe later on woke up to, you know, be more tolerant and accepting people, are some of the greatest people I know. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, in the times that I know I grew up in, and I think you as well, even though there is some age difference, it's like we were taught to break the rules, to non-conform in order to find your individuality in your voice, you know, and the originality was very important, and, you know, and how do you find originality without breaking rules? So, and that was coming out of the punk era, you know.
That whole thing was discouraged in my neighborhood, and, you know, my family, they, you know, my father was military, and my mother, and both of them are very, like, quiet, conservative. They like to fly, they are not showy. They like to fly under the radar. They just like the conventional things that life has to offer, and they're kind and sweet and loving, and, you know, I didn't understand convention. I didn't, you know, get it, and I couldn't, you know, find a middle ground at one point where I could both see myself and relate to my family.
Right.
As you get older, you start to understand how to find middle ground with people, and how to agree to disagree with people, or how to just, you know, you don't have to tell your parents everything. I mean, the things they've heard, I mean, the poor things.
Yeah, my mother used to say that to me, Gail, you don't have to tell me everything. My parents were the opposite. They were like the jet setters, the parties every Saturday at the home, and taking off, traveling, and they dressed flamboyantly, and, you know, just lived that kind of life. And it's kind of interesting how we think. I think, you know, it's a kind of a balance between, like, we ended up there anyhow, you know, no matter what.
I was kind of parents, like, even if because I have a brother, and he's straight, and he lives in Los Angeles, and my parents are like, where did we get these two creatives? You know, like, he does comedy, and he's a painter, and he does, you know, all of that type of work, acting, and all of that.
Yeah. That's genetic makeup, I guess, right?
Well, we're the only two out of a huge...
someone.
So it's I think my parents didn't realize just how supportive and loving and that they were, because they, you know, I wanted to do theater, and my mother took me to, you know, go and do theater as a kid. It's just that the kids were merciless. You know, I would be bullied to death, you know, so I couldn't do theater. It wasn't because my parents didn't let me. It was because society was different then.
Yeah, I didn't get, well, you know, that didn't happen. I just did what I wanted. But, yeah, there was no theater that I can remember. So that was great that there was theater in your younger life. That's marvelous. You know, you've grown into an amazing artist with, you know, work we have to share with everybody. We're doing this podcast and giving visibility to other artists. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, no, I really am grateful that, you know, I landed 6 years ago, I landed back here in New York for good. Like, you know, I'm settling down in New York in my old age. Nobody would know. But whatchamacallit, I have been blessed with the best of friends, the best of collaborators, you included.
Thank you. Back at you.
For people that, you know, everybody in my life is supportive, and I had coffee with Miss Guy the other day. Miss Guy is doing a photo series, so I would check out Miss Guy's work. Talented creature. Yeah, I did it. There's an image of him in some of my work, so he's absolutely amazing, and you know, just, you know, blessed with, you know, friends like Scooter LaForge and, you know, Penny Arcade, and, you know, just everybody, you know, like I could just sit here and you'd have to get a broom to mop up all the names that I could drop.
Right, you know? And that's what makes it a community.
It is
of artists, and it's beautiful, huh?
It really is a community, and it's like, you know, it's not like, I'm so grateful that things have transitioned. Like, I remember there was a time in the 90s where we were all so bitchy to each other, and being sort of bitchy was celebrated, and that's not the case anymore, you know?
We're not punk rockers anymore.
Yeah.
By the 50s movies. But it's been a half an hour, and Eileen, I love you, and I am so glad you were in my life, and I'm glad we got to share your journey, and there's so much more to talk about. We could talk for hours.
Yeah, I would the listeners through that.
But we can always do it again.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have to get low down on Ms. Gail Thacker, y'all.
Sure, we'll do that. We'll do that one day soon. And make sure you check on Anchor. We write a little something about the podcast, and on the bottom you'll have information on how to get to EileenDover's T-shirts and art.
It is EileenDover.net, and, you know, Gail has her art online. With
the Daniel Cooney Fine Art, yep. Mm-hmm.
Daniel Cooney Fine Art. Gail is, like, an amazing artist, just so that everybody, that's the one thing I want to say before this interview. And Gail is an amazing artist. People say, oh, she owns the Gene Frankel Theater or owns the Gene Frankel Theater. No, Gail is a brilliant artist and an established artist and an acclaimed artist. So,
if you look me up online, you find very little about theater.
She's got a Wikipedia page, everybody. I mean, come on. The woman is amazing.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. So, yeah, we'll go over pataphysics next time. That's what we'll do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, okay, how are we going to sign off here?
Well, I just want to say to everybody to keep tuning in. We have coming soon. We have Linda Simpson. We have Michael Mustro. We have we're going to
Catherine Chairs next week.
Absolutely, and we're going to get inside Gail Thacker's head too. So.
Yep, and we have some other great people coming out of Boston, which I will tell you next week because I've got them on hold right now. So we've got some really good people lined up. So stay tuned. Woo-woo. She's from Howell, Visual Aids, the Center. She's doing some amazing work in education and curating some great shows. So, hooray.
We're so lucky to live during this Renaissance. I know it seems crazy, but, like, I really believe that we're in a Renaissance, and, you know, I encourage people to support living artists, you know?
Yes. Yep. Very important. All right. I love you.
I love you.
Good night, everyone.